Thanks, Mike.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the Village of Lansing Planning Board meeting of October the 26th, 2021 to order at 7:03 p.m. First item on the agenda is, do we have approval of our minute? Do we have a minutes?
No, we don't.
I suddenly remembered that.
Yep, I failed you.
Next time. So the first item on our agenda is the public comment period. Is there anyone with us tonight who wants to bring up any subject that is not addressed by our agenda? If so, if you would raise your hand, or I do not see anyone. So I would
close the public comment period.
Yes, was that Mike? Mike, close the public comment period. Do I have a second? Tony? Tony got there first. All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the informal review of roadway exit entry at East Point Apartments. And I believe we have Marissa Vivenzio with us tonight to kind of fill us in on what's your intent for this.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Marissa Vivenzio. I'm the community manager at East Point Apartments in Lansing. I started with this apartment complex in August of last year. And so pretty quickly, I figured out that the second gate that is present there has always locked, and only the fire department has the key in the case of emergency. However, with the complex being completely full with almost 300 residents at this time, we have noticed, especially over the course of the year as it's been filling up, that there is a significant vehicular traffic problem within the complex. Mostly it's speeding, which if anybody has driven in this very small loop called East Point Drive, there's speed limit signs of 5 miles per hour because we have so many pedestrians, children, and pets. So what's happened is residents themselves, but also parcel delivery services, food delivery services, moving trucks, and anybody else who visits ends up speeding through the complex, which creates a hazard, safety hazard for all of our residents, children, and pets, who a lot of them walk. So that has, been brought to my attention, not only by my own self, by maintenance staff, by various residents. Even some residents have had issues with others who have been speeding. So to try to mitigate this, I have been, I've added a speed bump to try to, slow people down further to help with the safety of it. And I have 2 more speed bumps that I plan on installing in early 2022 after the snow. But the issue, of course, is safety. And I think that by opening that second gate as an exit only, it would decrease the amount of vehicular traffic within the complex itself, and which would reduce the people speeding through the complex, which would reduce the safety hazard it presents to all of our patrons that, come to East Point Apartments. So it's really what I'm trying to convey is the danger that the second gate not being open potentially provides for our complex. And I just really am trying to mitigate the safety issues that we currently have, which I believe would be decreased if that second gate was opened.
Marissa, could I ask you, so you said you wanted an exit only?
Correct. It's not wide enough for both entry and exit, so it'd have to be one or the other. I do believe exit only would make more sense in this particular case.
Does anybody else on the board have questions at all? I have one more. I was wondering in terms of, I don't really know, and I think one of the things that possibly you would want to check is whether you need a stop sign or some sort of crosswalk. That has been brought up in the past by somebody, I don't remember who, but I think you need to just explore those safety issues. This is a private road. So this, right, this is not a village
Yes.
road. So,
Correct, it's a private road.
right, okay,
I think to your point, Lisa, though, even though it's a private road, it does exit out onto a public right of way. So yeah, I would be interested to see what John Courtney says is needed there for that.
do you
And,
know,
and,
John?
and I'm glad you brought that up too, Marissa, right? It's not wide enough for two-way traffic, so.
Correct.
So do you know John Courtney, our DPW superintendent? If you
Yes,
can-
I have met John before. Yep.
Okay, so I think he's probably your best resource for some of those safety issues that you will need to comply with for the, for sidewalk and public access and that sort of thing. But other than that, I personally don't have any objection to this. I would assume that if it doesn't do what you're hoping, that, you would revisit that and maybe have to close it off again. But so would trucks also exit there? All traffic would be able to exit.
Yeah, all traffic would have the option to exit there. Whether or not they actually do, that would be up to their own devices as they're driving. But they would have the option to exit there, yes.
Okay,
And we would be willing to add any safety signage that we would need to add in order to have it flow properly onto Bomax Drive.
right.
I have a question.
Tony?
So although it's East Point Drive is not our concern itself, I have a question about whether there are speed bumps installed on East Point Drive, and if not, or if so, what do the residents think about speed bumps?
Yes, so we did install a speed bump, just one so far, and it has definitely helped slow down traffic around one of the bends, which is, I believe, the most dangerous and has the most blind spots. So it has decreased it, but then as soon as they go over the speed bump, it ends up being just a nice straightaway, and then they regain speed again, and it seems to only help for that certain area. I haven't had residents complain about it. They seem to be very happy about it because I've had numerous complaints from residents regarding the dangers of the driving in the complex. And like I do intend to put 2 more additional speed bumps throughout the complex, and after spring, after the winter for 2022.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Lisa. I got just a little
Oh,
something.
John,
yeah.
Great. John Courtney, go
Yep.
ahead.
One thing that I'd like to point out, that driveway was not constructed to the degree of strength that the other one was constructed at, because it wasn't originally designed for usage other than emergency service vehicles. So the thickness of the blacktops subpar for the amount of traffic load that's going to be on that. And that is a concern of ours, because that driveway still is in the village right away, and it is in the crosswalk area. So if that becomes broken up or something like that, they might have an issue with pedestrians crossing that driveway. Some of the other concerns I have was crosswalk striping, stop bar, traffic control. And I thought they ought to have maybe just the engineers kind of take a peek at it and just give us a plan so we can, I'm not sure they're going to be able to control the vehicles from entering there. That was one of my concerns. So if you have a vehicle exiting the same time a vehicle is entering, that vehicle that crosses the oncoming traffic from Bomax may have to stop in that lane, because it's basically a gridlock situation. So those are the concerns I had about it. How are they going to control people from entering there? I mean, cars just go where they want to go. And being, that's all I had.
So when you say engineers, you mean our engineers or their engineers?
No, I think their engineers should just come up with a plan on
Yes.
how they're gonna lay it out, how they're gonna put the stop bar in. And any advice they can do to, if there's any devices out there that would prevent people from entering there. I'm not saying like a curbed median or anything like that, but maybe even narrowing it up a little bit more so it almost acts like an exit only rather than have it just wide enough for two vehicles. I don't know. That's why I said leave it up to their engineers to kind of submit a plan to the village, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay. So does that sound reasonable to you, Marissa? Do we need to really take a
Yeah.
vote on this? I don't think we do, per se. I think as long as you take the advice of John and have your engineers do submit something so that we're sure that, everybody's thought this through for safety, especially is the main concern, as you pointed out.
Right. Yeah,
But I
that
think-
makes sense.
Good. Okay,
I have a question about this, actually.
go ahead, Mr. Frey.
Yeah, so it was, I live in the adjacent neighborhood, Janivar, Craft Road, Leaf. And when the development was coming into place, it was understood that there would only be entering and exiting traffic up at the top to limit the amount of traffic that would come through the adjoining neighborhood. And so this seems to now be ignoring that. And yeah.
And so
I
that was,
don't-
yeah, when this topic came up, that was a discussion we had when East Point was going in and the developers were here. That was a discussion we had, was to have that, the current or the primary entry exit be the only one and save the other one for emergency vehicles, which is why initially that gate was open, and that was before you were there, Marissa, and it was brought to the board's attention, and it was locked off after the fact because that was the original intent.
Right. I understand for sure. I think the only thing that I would say to that is that with the townhomes that have been being built very rapidly, kind of in between the Janivar neighborhood and East Point neighborhood, I think, is going to be adding a lot more people, a lot more traffic through both of those neighborhoods as well. So I'm not sure. Like, I know during development that was discussed, but with new developments going on and people added and more vehicular traffic, I don't know how relevant that might be anymore.
I think at the time, one of the main concerns was especially for constructions. And so that, in terms of, I think it's more convenient for most people to turn right and go out to Warren. But I will say that whenever I do go through there, I don't ever see much traffic one way from either place, frankly. But I mean, it does happen. I don't know whether, yeah. But, we didn't make it an absolute condition, as I remember. I'd have to check the minutes, but as I recall, it was mostly that people were concerned during construction. We don't really want truck traffic, especially. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much truck traffic you get, Marissa. Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so for vendors, for deliveries, for supplies that we need, we'll get that. I would say, 18-wheelers, I would say maybe twice a month. But we do have, all the UPS, FedEx, all the parcel delivery services coming through there all day long. And then another thing we do have is a lot of U-Hauls and moving trucks, especially very heavy during, from March to about, the end of October, I would say. So it's not like necessarily every day for 18-wheelers, but, a lot of people who move here across the country, they do have, pretty big U-Hauls or 18-wheelers, the smaller U-Hauls, all the parcel delivery services, all their box trucks.
But I wouldn't think that they would go through, I don't know, maybe Mr. Frey, you can tell me whether the big trucks don't go through Janivar, do they? No, they would go out to Warren, I would think.
Yeah, when they leave, that they would go out to Warren. The parcel delivery services, obviously they go
Well,
everywhere.
that's-
Yeah.
Okay,
And Lisa, you're correct. One of the conditions to the special permit was that construction traffic during the build was to exit by way of Warren Road.
right.
And I think it's interesting too, that, you know, when we had the discussion, it was, the condition was construction traffic. The other discussion we had was trying to encourage, you know, residents of East Point from not driving down through the existing neighborhood there. But one of the things I don't recall taking into account is, you know, what the future and safety of East Point would look like when it was fully inhabited. So we were more concerned about what the existing neighborhoods looked like, not what that area would look like. So if, you know, if there is a safety concern there and it would help ease traffic there, I don't think opening that second gate is necessarily going to add traffic going down through Lansing Trails 1 and 2. Maybe it will, but I don't think that, you know, that's necessarily clear. So
Monica, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking the way that that's set up. I mean, the other opening is what, like 70 yards down the road. It's not that far away from the other entrance. Yeah, I feel like it would still be more convenient. If I was living there, I would always go on Warren Road because the other neighborhood there, Lansing Trails, is like 15 stop signs. And so even if it did, you know, was a shortcut to Trip Hammer, it's not really, because I have to stop a million times before I get there. So it would be much more convenient, I think, for most people to go to Warren Road, just in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I sort of think too, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of difference that if they were going to go through Lansing Trails, they would do so regardless of where they're coming out. But okay, well, I think then, Marissa, next steps are if you just do as John Courtney suggested, you know, just
Okay.
have your engineers deal with this and give us, you know, pass it by the village. And in case there are any concerns.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Mhm. So the next item on our agenda is to continue the public hearing for special permit 2021-4516 Arrowhead Ventures Tri-Axe Management Group to develop Area B of the Lansing Meadows Plan Development Area, which includes 18 single-family senior housing units, tax parcel number 47.1-1-17.21 and 47.1-1-17.29. This project is directly adjacent to the standalone retail center BJ's Wholesale Club, Area A, and the proposed commercial section A1 of the PDA that is adjacent to the shops at Ithaca Mall and is also adjacent to the enhanced wetlands, Area C of the PDA, adapted to provide a bird habitat and buffer between areas A and B of the PDA. So when we last met, Mr. Getzman was going to be going to the BZA with his appeal. That appeal was not settled that night, so we are continuing to move forward as usual with this project. And Mr. Getzman, do you have something you want to bring to us tonight?
Sure. Mike, could you share a couple of photos I sent you earlier, just the screen?
Which ones, Eric?
I think well, we sent some for the BZA, but I sent you some later this afternoon too. I'm not sure if you received those.
I'll put them up here and you tell me which ones they are. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, I think there was just two of them that came in today. Mike.
Last one?
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's fine. And there's two of those. So just to bring the planning board up to speed where we are, since the last meeting, we had substantial amount of site work has occurred. The entire site is paved. We're starting to put topsoil in so we can hydro seed as soon as this rain stops. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but we would have had this hydro seeded now had we not been for the last week or so with the rain. So there's one photo of the house there, and there's one, I think, the other site. Mike, if you can show that. But that's really the site now is graded and ready to move forward with it. So I just wanted to bring the board up to speed where the site is today. And then I think to continue with the special permit application we have, maybe you could help me too. I think two of the issues we're looking at were the landscaping plan, and the other one was the moving forward with the sidewalk and the design along Oak Crest and along the buffer between Chow and our property. So we've had a number of discussions, a number of back and forth with John and his group and Dondi, our engineers. Last meeting I had, I apologize. I don't know what happened to my internet in my office, but it just stopped working for some reason. So I missed a good portion of that meeting. I did go back and watch the YouTube that Mike had sent out so I could see where we left off, and just want to follow up with that. The last meeting we submitted the plans. I think we all still have them, which shows really the site plan of where the sidewalks are going. The detail I mentioned that we were still following through was the underneath the sidewalk. And Mike Scott did show some elevations during that to show what's going on. But that's really where a lot of our thrust has been with the engineers to make sure that it meets what they're looking for. And I think we're there. John is on too. So I did meet with John this morning, trying to address any other comments that might be out there. But that's really with the site where we were. And I think the other issues we were looking at too were the landscaping plans. There was some, I think, understanding where the landscaping plan was. We do have a plan that was approved in the special permit we had back in July of 2019, which you have in the plan I submitted last time. The only change in that plan were the change in the type of trees, really because the blue spruce and the needle thrash that happens with there. So those were switched out, and those are marked on the plan. And since then, I've gone back and looking at what's on there and working with the chairperson and Mike Scott, trying to see if we need some additional screening on there. So I think you can see along the south side, you have the white fir and the white pine that goes along the back. And I think one of the discussions we have is you go further east towards the Chow restaurant. There was a suggestion that we put additional trees there because if you look out from that very end building, looking south towards the YMCA, you're going to see right there. So I think, subject to what the planning board, we would continue the role of trees across there. It is part of the buffer. In addition, I went over and met with Frank Towner of the YMCA because right across there, I think the issue was there's a big red metal container they're using to collect metal for. And Frank has since taken that away, and it's something that they're not going to continue on. In addition, there were two, I think, small dumpsters that the Y has determined it's better to move across the parking lot next to their entrance. They built a building there, so they're going to relocate those. So those would be gone. But in addition to not having those containers there, I think we'll continue the trees further down to add additional screening in that location for the people who are in there. And I think one other addition was on the northwest corner along Oak Crest. There was some concern that there are two windows, I believe, on that side of that one home, and that we should look at something. And I think we agree with that. We should put, I think we consider putting there are lilacs that can grow fairly decent in size in front of there on the end of the building. So those would be the additional plantings that have changed from the previously approved plan that I think would help screen, people who are in these homes and so forth.
I had an errand to run today, and I did drive over to the Y parking lot. And yeah, the large dumpster was gone. I'm glad to hear they're moving the others because it's pretty unsightly. But again, I mean, my concern is what your residents look out at, but also what other people look at. You look down and see somebody reading their newspaper in the living room. I just think it would be helpful if you had those trees there. But wow, given the rain we're having today, there's a culvert that comes there out, right? A parallel to the buildings up and parallel to the land of that where it abuts the YMCA. And I don't know, I don't know if there's anything that's good for absorbing some water, but helping that, because it was really, I mean, just a stream going through there, of course. So I don't know. This rain is maybe showing up some things that might need to be addressed. I have no idea. I don't know if you were there today or not.
Well, I was on site and I saw that, and that's really the pass-through water coming from, further up off the property. So that passes through, but we have plenty of room up top there, because I had our landscaping person come down and look at that also. There's plenty of room to plant trees above that.
Okay. And you don't need to put, like, I don't know, riprap or something in there to kind of, I don't know. I'm just asking. I really don't know enough about it, but I was really concerned about the amount of water going through there. And I thought, oh boy, we just keep having more of this kind of stuff happening. So I just think we have to be prepared for it. But okay.
Can I raise a concern? Can I raise a concern? This is John.
Yes, please. Yes.
One of our recommendations we made in the plan review was to show the utilities on the landscape plan. In the cedar tree area between BJ's and the lower west units, they're all in conflict with the sanitary sewer. Every one of them. They're sitting directly over it, to the best that we can put on there. They have the ability to add a layer of utilities on all these. And I met with Jim Bold out there a week and a half ago or so. And the west trees they moved them a little bit more to the west towards the property line. There'll be a long time before there's conflicting with the overhead utilities. And Eric says those are private or temporary. I'm not sure exactly for sure if they're all temporary. I know there's some phone cables there, but those won't be an issue for a long time. And by that time, they'll probably be replaced with something small, because when they get big, they don't necessarily look so appealing. The cedars to the south on the west end of the property, they're in conflict with the sewer. I don't even know if you can shift them. It's so tight in there because there's a couple drainage ways down in there. I don't know if there's something that would be, and it's naturally wet in there, and I'm not sure how they do in wet soils. It's super
John,
saturated in there.
Are you talking about the little small circles? The little-
They're
Yes,
no,
I
it's
think it's the red cedars.
Yeah,
That's
they're
correct, John.
cedars that go. They're basically, yep.
Those.
I'm
Okay.
looking on a phone, so it's really hard.
Yes,
Yes,
but those are the
that's
ones.
yeah. There's and adding an overlay of the utilities with the drainage swales and stuff would help get a better understanding of conflicts are there. There is major conflicts there.
Okay.
And I think, John.
So
John-
what is the village's responsibility if we have to go in there and flush that line or do a repair on the line? Are we responsible to replace these trees if we take them out? I mean, we have an easement there. They're all in the easement area.
Well, I do
I don't want
remember,
to
I do remember
complicate
when this
things. I'm
came
not
up,
trying to complicate.
I'm sorry, when this came up at BJ's, this also came up, is that, there was some plantings over some of the utilities. And I think that's where some of the grasses that did not do well were put. What are some of the options that could be there? Eric, did you tell me, because I had suggested too, a fence? I mean, I don't know if there's even room for that.
No, I think so. John, when I met with John today, he talked about having that layer turned on, and I couldn't get that in time for this meeting, but there's what it is John's referring to is a sewer lateral coming from the BJ's gasoline house. So the attendant has a toilet in there. That's the line that comes across and goes down. So that's the line we're talking about here. In the issue, I think you're right, Lisa, is the fact that there's like a 4-foot wall on the other side of those. So putting a fence wouldn't do any good. You know, we did this with the BJ's. It's difficult because it's the fence is right up against the roadway there. So there really isn't room for a fence. That's why we changed to these green giants, because they can grow with more of a wet foot in the water, not in the water, but they're on the edge here. So I think we need to turn that later on, which John suggested, but again, it's one sewer line for that little house that's there. It's not any other sewer lines for any of this or any sewer coming across or through the property. So it's a pipe that, it's down. And again, if we're off them a little bit, the roots, again, hopefully won't impact them.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't suspect the cedars, they grow deep rooted. I think they're
But
shallow
they
rooted.
don't. No, they fall over nicely when it's weather
And-
like this.
And I think the red
Yeah.
cedars are probably the best screen for there too. I mean, out of everything we've looked at, I think they're probably most appropriate for a lot of reasons.
Well, they grow pretty well here.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's red or eastern, but they tend to be pretty happy here and seem to just be semi-native. I don't know if they are native or not, but okay, so you want to resubmit the landscaping plan that you're proposing with those changes with utilities
if you're good-
overlay?
Yeah, if you're good with those comments, the other additions that I suggested, we'll do so. I just didn't want to have too many plans because of revisions every time. So I'll put the other trees on that I suggested in the lilacs, and we'll put that layer on with the where that one sewer line is.
Well, let me
And
ask if
also,
anybody,
we'll put the other sewer line on because John mentioned that. And I think I wasn't in that meeting when he met with Jim, but I think they kind of thought they would just push the trees further west, off away from that sewer line. In the lines that John was talking about, that's a temporary power that we put in a long time ago. And that was put in from Oak Crest over so we could feed the construction site of the BJ. So that will be coming out.
does anybody else on the planning board have any questions or comments on what Eric has proposed? Right. So we had started to sort of look over some possibilities for special conditions, but maybe that's jumping ahead a little bit. So the sidewalk is still, plan is also not complete. I was on the BZA meeting and one of the things that came up was the water is still not hooked up. What's the holdup, Eric, with the water? I thought everything was resolved. I didn't understand from that meeting what the holdup is.
Well, everything, the water is our last piece. It's the connection, it's the last, I'm going to call it last 40 feet to connect to the Bolton Point municipal water system. The issue is the parts. Everything we've ordered, the main parts are on site, which the parts we thought were the longest lead items, are on site, which are the backflow preventers, the major these are giant meters. The issue we're faced right now is all the connecting pieces. I mean, the backflow system, the backflow preventer goes in a building that's 12 feet by 24 feet. And in there are all the reducer pipes with steel flange pipes lined with cement. And these are the parts that are just backward and we're waiting for these to come in. That's what's holding us up, is connecting this.
So these aren't the parts that you submitted paperwork to us back in August?
Well, no, we've submitted, but there's a whole bunch of parts in addition to the three main components that we all thought were the long pieces, which are the giant backflow preventers
Yeah.
and water meter. So what the issue is all the other little pieces, all the T's and Y's and the 90s, the reducers, they're what's called a flange. It's a metal piece at the end
Right.
of the pipe, and they reduce down in size and they go to T's and 90s, and it's just people across the country. We looked everywhere across the country for these parts, and they're just almost impossible to find. And people, we're not the only ones, but just about everybody's trying to install water systems right now or faced with the same issues we are. We need the parts.
Okay. All right. So,
Hey, Lisa?
yes, Mike, sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. Couple things that we hadn't, one thing we had touched on is a sidewalk. John Courtney, you guys pretty close to getting that thing settled with Adam, their engineer?
I can't get plans 2 hours or on the same day and review them in time. I mean, we had flooding today going on. We didn't get to it. We didn't get to the review. We reviewed some of it and then we just couldn't get it in time. We sent them to him a couple weeks ago and we just got them today. So.
No apology needed.
Okay, thanks.
Um,
And
Just in fairness, I got those from John, maybe last week, John, and we turned them around with our engineers with all the comments addressed, that's all. And I tried to meet with you yesterday to see if you had any additional comments before I gave them to you, and I didn't realize, you weren't in yesterday. So I was trying to get that meeting before I sent them to have them revised again. And without that, I just had them sent this morning so you'd have them in time. So when I was down there. So, but the comments that we had were just, they're minor comments, the under the ground issues that Dante, your engineer, had raised. And it's just, okay, it's moving something a couple inches or something else. But the sidewalk design that you have in front of you, which shows the sidewalk inside the village right away, that's the plan that we're looking at. And I think it's really, the final stage is going to be subject to the approval of the superintendent of public works and your engineer, which usually is how we do this. And I think we're
Right.
there. It's the layout that, I think that should concern the village. And that's the thing that we try to go back, because the underneath side was so difficult that at one point we all said, well, it's probably easier just to move it over. And then the village engineer came back and said, well, let's try and keep it where it is. So we did. So that's why I went to the trustee at one point to try and move it. But the location is where it's going to be. That's not going to change. There's a couple of minor points that the engineers are just crossing the T's and dotting their I's, but I think that, like always, can be done, as a condition, that final approval. So.
Okay, so we're moving on. One of the things I did want to ask about, Eric, is A1. It's still part of this parcel, I believe. Is that correct? It's never
Yes,
been-
it always has. No, it always has been part of it. We were trying to do the subdivision a year ago. We were going to try and remove that out, but we just, that came to a standstill. So,
Well,
but the A1,
yeah,
I'm sorry, the A1, we've had some discussion over the years about that. And I think at our last approval we had in July of 2019, I think the board was fairly clear, until we finished the housing, you did not want me back in front of you to talk about A1. We're now getting towards the tail end of that. And look, I've done I've had to focus to get this done, but now that the housing is coming, to a point where we can cross the finish line on a portion of this, I think A1 can now be addressed, and hopefully the board will, accept looking at some proposals up here.
well, except that there's these two other buildings that are part of this that I think are of great concern to us, and as to them being completed. I mean, I don't think anyone here wants those two buildings to languish for another 10 years. So I'm just wondering what you think is going to happen with these two buildings and how it relates to A1.
Well, I mean, it's completely separate from A1, but the goal, I think part of it, we're trying to get through the permit right now, is the next phase that we've had. We've had 2 phases, throughout this project with the housing. And so the second phase would be, the building, the last 2 buildings on there. And, it's something that with the conditions now, I think we mentioned in previous meetings, we wouldn't start, and it'd be a goal to start it next spring. But I can't sit here and say, what's going to happen to our supply chain, what's going to happen to COVID issues. We like to begin. I mean, that would be our preference, and then move forward, with a timeline to get those done. And while we're doing those, we would like to move forward, in move forward with something on A1 if we can. And I hope the board would be open at that point to look at things.
Well, we'll see how that goes, because I would assume that for the very reasons that you can't predict what might happen with these 2 homes or 2 housing units, the same would apply to anything you're going to build on A1. But We can address that later. We've got some other things to deal with first, but I just wanted to be sure. I really feel as though that needs to be subdivided out. It's sooner is later, no?
We'll, at some point, yes, we'll be subdividing that out.
Well,
We-
since
we
there are
have-
some
we
of
have-
these other holdups, why would you not deal with that now? I mean, I'm assuming that will have to go to the trustees, right?
I don't think so. It's just, it's a subdivision in the parcel.
Whether it's a major or a minor would be up for us to decide, but I didn't,
Yes.
they gave, what, Mike, would you have any thoughts on that?
As far as the subdivision,
If they divided A1 off?
that would come to the planning board first, or like you said, whether it was a major or minor subdivision. If it's a minor subdivision, then you can take care of it. Consider it a
Otherwise-
major subdivision, then he has to go back to the trustees.
Okay,
I think-
My other comment was, and we got a little bit past this, I kind of wanted to find out. The first meeting, we were talking about stormwater, we were talking about everything and kind of get a little bit of an update. I don't know whether Brent has anything to say as far as have all the stormwater issues we've talked about, are they up to date? Are the laterals now within village approval? You know, just kind of the whole, everything that's going on the job site. I want to make sure that we're all okay with this before we get too far in.
go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, so I've been keeping an eye on the progress there, and as Eric had alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, that they've made some progress on site improvements in one of the areas that they was on my list was final grading and finalization of the stormwater, the SWIP plan. I had been out there, I think it was Thursday or Friday, and they were working on filling up the grade around the detention area, which brings it up to the final engineered plan. I haven't been out there to observe it specifically, but I'm anticipating that that part is either complete or will be complete in the near future. And that I've had conversations with Eric kind of all through this process to reiterate that it's critical to get the ground surface stabilized for the winter time. And, I think that we all feel his pain in that the weather here has been not ideal. And I know, John, I haven't had a chance to catch up with John, but I think all of us in the public works world were kind of on pins and needles all day today with flooding and sewer flows. So I'm the other question, Mike, you stated specifically, was the resolution of the laterals to the future connections. And my understanding is between John and myself, we came to a kind of a compromise position that Eric and his crew dug each one of them up, shortened them to approximately the edge of the paved road area. I know John specifically was the one to observe those. I went out and checked, progress myself, but John was in contact with the communication with the contractor. I think each one of them was cut off as short as we could get, recapped, a thrust block or a concrete block added to contain the cap, and a marker post added. So I think at this point, John and I hadn't spoken directly about it, but I think that we were both on the same page on that.
Hey, Brent, we won't be able to do, this is as much of a question as a statement, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that the SWIP for that project we're not gonna be able to have a notice of termination until the second buildings are done, correct?
I
the-
think so. I mean, you're not gonna be able to close it. He might be able to apply for a winter shutdown, but in terms of the NOT, I don't think that that's available until the, not only is all of the work done, but the grass, I believe, has to be germinated to an 85% completion, and that's clearly not going to happen until next year, so.
So Brent, what's NOT, please?
That stands, so the SWIP, the New York State DEC SWIP is acknowledged by the submittal of a term called NOI, or Notice of Intent, by
Oh,
the
okay.
developer. And then the NOT is on the other end of it is when the local government is satisfied that they've completed the work according to the plans and specifications. There's a document that gets submitted to the DEC called an NOT, which is short for Notice of Termination. And so
Okay.
that's a kind of a milestone. And that means that at that point, the file is closed out at the DEC. But right now, what will happen is here in the very near future, if Eric's able to hydroseed the entire site, which would qualify for stabilization, he can then request what's known as a winter shutdown, which reduces the inspections from weekly to monthly, I think, until which time the work reconvenes in the springtime.
Okay. So I think one of the things that I would like to see is when all these things are finally completed, written approval from you and John Courtney, and I would like everything in writing, please. So that we find, anybody who comes after us will know exactly what happened. That would be very helpful.
Yep.
Anybody else have any comments? So Mike and I had worked, as I said, on starting out to look at some of the conditions for the special permit. Let me just say is because the appeal is still open, Eric is continuing to work. When is the next BZA meeting? Was it November 16th or the week before? Is it the 3rd?
I believe
The
it's,
third?
I believe it's the 16th.
The
isn't it?
16th.
November 16th, that's what I thought. Okay. So that's when you'll be going back to them for that. And you will continue to work like crazy until then, I hope. Okay, so Mike Scott and I looked back at the previous special permit, and I don't know how much time we want to spend tonight on this, because we do have another agenda item that may take some time, but did my board members have a chance to look at this, I should ask? Because it wasn't sent out terribly far in advance either. But what we tried to do was essentially incorporate a lot of the same things, like our usual, soil and erosion control, prior to a building permit being issued, it obviously doesn't apply. So we have to work on the language for that. But still it's approval by the engineer, stormwater officer, about the site work, stormwater management, all of those usual A, B, and C that we have required permits and approvals from other authorities, such as the federal, state, and county governments. So, but beyond that, we tried to bring in the things that were still open from the previous special permit that's expired, and perhaps add a few things. So, for example, prior to a certificate of compliance being issued, a maintenance agreement submitted to and approved by the village attorney, village engineer, and stormwater management officer pertaining to stormwater facilities. So we don't have a stormwater maintenance agreement yet either. Is that correct, Brent? We didn't get one before, I don't think yet.
Right, we don't have one yet, but it is traditional that's probably one of the last things
Yeah.
for closeout documents when it comes time for, there seems to be probably, I don't know what the status is, but I know that they've been working on the legal descriptions for easements and that type of thing. So it kind of becomes one of the last items.
Yeah,
So-
that agreement is usually sent here and Brent looks it over, then comes back and then I approve it and then we can release the NOT at that point, notice of termination.
But as you said, that may not happen until phase 2 is complete for the whole, well, you have to have one, don't you, before the other buildings could be occupied, I suppose. Well, at any rate, it's on the list, shall I say. So we have that usual one. We have a landscaping plan shall be submitted and approved prior to the installation of any plantings. We have something on the sidewalk. And I guess what I would suggest is that the thing that I would like to hear from Eric mostly is, we had some deadlines in our last one that were not met. So you say work. So one of the things that I was having some trouble with is Mike, in accordance with the county's wishes, I believe, how they like buildings to be numbered for addresses, has renumbered the buildings. And so I believe the 2 buildings that are not completed are buildings 8 and 14. And I would like to sort of, Mike has this on his, I think, can share the screen, as I would like to be sure that we're all using the same numbers going forward so that there's no confusion. So when you sent us pictures, Eric, like of what building 4 looks like or looked out at, I think that was building 32. Is that correct?
Yes,
So that's 32 and 26 was number 3.
correct.
And 20 is 2, and then number 2 was building 1, but I don't think you sent pictures of that. So
Right.
the 2 outstanding buildings are 8 and 14, correct?
Correct. And that was done because of the even addresses. So building 1 is 246, because it's on the one side.
Right.
And 10, 12. So that's what they were changed. But we can change a reference to that if that's easier.
I just want everybody to be using the same numbers,
Okay.
please, so that it's very confusing otherwise,
Okay.
Because also it got changed from what originally, those last 2 buildings weren't the ones that we're going to do last. One of them might have been, but I don't know. So you believe your intention is to start those in the spring.
That's what we'd like to do.
And what's spring to you? Is April spring? May spring? What's spring?
April, May is probably that time frame. It's really when the construction that changes all the time, but that's what we'd like to do.
Okay. So I think the planning board needs to be thinking about some deadlines in their, for our next meeting. That we still are looking for an escrow account to be established and funded for the sidewalks. I have no idea whether it's going to be able to be put in before winter or whatever is going to happen, but we do need that funded. And then we will have some deadlines we'll want. I would like to hear from you when you really, next meeting, just give us some firmer ones for the current buildings that you expect to be completed. And then, some projected thoughts on the last 2 buildings. And then the other stuff is pretty much what we had, but I think we made a few little changes that I think we will just discuss that at our next meeting, because I don't think my board's had enough time to really absorb some of this. It was too last minute. I didn't keep with our 2 business days in advance of the meeting myself. So I think.
Is there anything that you could allude to so we could be prepared to discuss it too?
No, mostly it has to do with deadlines. And the escrow account, I think we might want to consider an escrow account for landscaping if things don't proceed as planned. We can discuss that with you. But other than that, no, most of it was pretty much the same as last time, including deadlines and including if certain deadlines are not met, the planning board does reserve the right to take up a proposal to void special permit number blah, 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 and the associated. And I would say I would change the language somewhat personally and any open building permits associated with. But again, that's for discussion because this was just our first pass. And so those are the only things that probably would be different from everything that's already there from the last one.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
it's John Langy. As you know, I'm the attorney for the applicant.
right.
Could you preview or discuss any, well, we've heard the comments that you've made, the potential old conditions and some newer conditions. Are there any conditions that we need to be aware of prior to the next meeting that you have not expressed at this point, just so we can all be ready and not have to be reactive, think through it?
I think we could probably I'll just have Mike send those along to you.
Well,
but
that would be, yes, please. Do all the board members have your list of items right now?
Yes, I think they do.
Okay, yeah.
I
then
don't
we
know
would-
if they've had a chance to look at them as this thing, but there's no secrets here.
Well,
So we're happy to.
So yeah, subject to your attorney's review, we would ask that any new written materials that are distributed to the board that are going to be actually discussed at the next meeting, if we could get a courtesy copy in advance of that,
Sure.
so I could discuss it. I just think it'll help move it along at a brisker pace than we've been plodding with, and we do appreciate all of the help and cooperation from the board.
Yeah, some of the things I just want to be sure, I've not gotten input from the board myself, so I would like to have an open discussion at any rate. There are, like I said, no secrets here. So I guess I had yellow highlighted some items where I think maybe the language needs a little tune up, but other than that, I see no reason to not share unless Mr. Troy thinks we should not. I don't know if he's there. Bill, are you still there?
I am. I appear. Let me look at it, Lisa. John, if we can get it to you, we'll just send it to you, okay?
I'd appreciate that, Bill. Thanks.
Okay, other than that, is there anything else that anyone has questions about tonight on this project? If not, I assume you would like to be on the agenda for our next meeting.
Yes,
Is that
very-
correct?
yes.
That being November the 8th. Mr. Lange, are you available then?
You know, I'm available for a little bit of it.
Okay, we'll put you first.
That's a 7 o'clock start.
Yes,
Yeah, okay. I do have a town board meeting I have to attend at 6:30. So I'll do what I can. Well, I'll do my best to
Would-
stay.
would you prefer that we make you later?
I know, you never know. As you can
I
imagine,
know,
you never know how long your meetings are gonna last. And we're
I
in
know.
we're in budget sessions now with all of our boards, and people are trying to get their marijuana laws in place. So we're helping a lot of people.
We are indeed trying to get our marijuana laws in
But
place.
I will be there.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
okay, all right, good enough. Thank you. Okay, the next.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, good night, Eric.
All right, everyone.
The next item on our agenda is to continue the informal review of an approved cluster subdivision preliminary plat proposal by the Beer Properties. Beer Properties and Hunt Engineers are providing a plat of a cluster subdivision for property parcel 45.2-1-47.2, which consists of approximately 40 acres of vacant land located between Craft Road and Bush Lane. The plat, along with details of proposed duplex lots will be reviewed by the planning board. So we have with us Steve and David Beer, and I believe Mr. Schlather, you're here with us as well in this regard. Steve and David, are you here?
Ray, you're, okay, there you go, Ray.
There you go. I'm here. Ray Schlatter, I am. And the Beers are here. And I believe Chris Wood is also here, I hope.
Oh,
I'm
Chris
here.
is. Yep, I see Chris.
Yep.
Okay,
Fair enough. You want us to start?
yes, please.
All right. So I'm a new face to this discussion, and I appreciate your willingness to put it on the agenda this evening. It's all very interesting that proceeded. The situation here, as you know, is that in November of 19, you guys approved preliminary site plan review, and obviously COVID hit. You have before you my letter of October 15th of 2021. You have a letter of today's date of October 26th of 2021, which includes a 4-page or 5-page set of materials that lists all of the concerns that had been raised by Mr. Cross and by Mr. Courtney in meetings. And just to give you a little bit more history, as you know, this matter was brought back before you in March of 2021. At that time, it was treated as a final site plan review, and the matter was then kicked to the staff for review and comment. During April of 2021, there was a report back by Mr. Scott to this board saying that meetings were being set up. In May of 2021 and in June of 2021, those meetings happened. And in fact, Mr. Courtney and Mr. Cross both weighed in with a set of concerns. And what the Beers have done with Mr. Wood is that they have taken those concerns and they have agreed. And as you can see in the 5 pages that I've attached to my submission of today's date, they have agreed to accommodate every single one of those concerns but one. And the one concern, and if you look at it, there's a grid here and it kind of sets it all out, and I hope everybody's had a chance, but those materials had already been substantively shared with you back in August in the form of a letter from the Beers to you folks. But in any event, they've agreed with everything but one. And the one has to do with the intersection alignment that was brought to their attention for the first time in May and June of 2021. Now, the significance of that fact is that when this matter was brought up for preliminary review back in 2019, Mr. Cross was present at that time, and I think it was June of 2019. Everybody reviewed the preliminary plans. Nobody raised a concern about the intersection design or alignment. Nobody raised a concern about anything to do with that particular aspect of the preliminary plan. When the matter was then presented to the board for final vote at final preliminary vote in November of 2019, nobody raised a concern about that. And this board then voted unanimously to accept the preliminary plat. It was only most recently that this new concern has been raised. And unfortunately, and Mr. Wood can attest to this, there have been hundreds of hours of engineering time, redesigning time, meeting the concerns that were raised at the November 2019 meeting. That all has been accommodated in the final plat design that you have before you. That was all accommodated, and even more so since that time, as we have indicated, Mr. Courtney's concerns and Mr. Cross's concerns are both being accepted and will be enacted and implemented into this project. The only thing that they're pushing back on is this intersection realignment. And I think understandably so, the village law gives them the right. Once preliminary review is passed, there is certainly, as part of the final review process, there is opportunity for tweaking the plans, but there is not opportunity for wholesale redesign of the plan. And so as a matter of law, they have every right to stand on the design that they have proposed. And they have indeed chosen that path, not just because they want to be arbitrary or ornery, but they've chosen it for economic reasons and frankly for logistical reasons. And therefore, we are asking the board this evening to act on this final site plan review and to act on it this evening by vote.
So, hey, Lisa. So I will
Yeah.
just share, I'll share with everyone here that anything that was delivered via email today, I've not looked at. So I don't know substance wise what's in the email, but I've not looked at that today.
Well, then
Well,
maybe, may I,
I will say that, you know what? This is just, when decisions are made in haste, you don't get the best decisions. This is too important, but you have had the opportunity, I trust, to look at the preliminary plat and what the final plat looks like. And from the time that the preliminary plat was voted as approved by the board, to the time that the final plat came forward, there was no interaction with the planning board at all. There was interaction, I believe, with our engineers. I recall the meeting somewhat differently about the intersections and concerns where it was going to hook up in the future with Lansing Trails. I always forget whether it's 3 or whatever, or the heights, and concerns about, well, the roads kept changing, frankly. But the final plat, we didn't see until March of 2021 was the first time the planning board saw. So over almost a year and a half went by before we even knew it existed. And in 2019, there was an issue where the Deere decided to sell some of their lots. And it originally came with 8, and then I think it went down to 4, but we're not informed of that. And I believe it was Mr. Baker who said, you know, I really take exception with the fact we didn't know this change had occurred. And so at that meeting, we said, please come to us when you have changes that you want to make so that we're aware of them. And that did not happen until March of 2021. And so that final plat looks very different in many ways. The wetlands were changed, the sizes of the lots were changed. So I don't know, but aside from that, you know, our code is pretty specific about deadlines. And even with COVID, I believe that kind of the last deadline that should have been met was November of 2020. And they did not come to us with their final plat or ask for an extension on anything other than initially for the preliminary. So essentially it's lapsed. I mean, if we want to put a fine point on it. Mike, Scott?
I just want to remind the planning board that taking a vote on anything tonight, first of all, wouldn't be legal anyway, because this has been an informal review of the preliminary plat. We have yet to set a public hearing for the final plat. And the informal review was because it was a courtesy for the Bears, because for this to review the previous approved preliminary plat, because we hadn't seen it in so long. And at that point, the changes, the planning board noticed the changes, as you well know, and we got the engineers together. So we haven't even officially gone through the final plat public hearing or even opened it up, because that's going to involve an escrow amongst a bunch of other things. So to vote on something tonight to pass it would be impossible.
Well, I think given what Mike Bacon said too, is we didn't get this information in a timely fashion, and it needs deliberation. It's too important, but I don't think I was intending to go to vote with it, but yes, Mr. Schlather.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the concern about today's submission, only because I certainly understand, and I've sat on boards before, and I understand the need to receive and absorb the material. And in fact, I've discussed this with my clients. We are prepared to accept an adjournment to either the next meeting or the meeting thereafter. But I do want to correct a couple of things, though. First of all, when I'm looking at the preliminary plat and I'm looking at the final plat, the road design is the same. It's an offsetting set of T intersections. Those are identical, which was approved before. Everything else, all the other concerns are being addressed and are being accepted by the Beers. But more importantly, in terms of the timing, there was interaction. I think, Madam Chair, you're correct. There was interaction by and between the Beers and staff during 2020. I mean, we all understand COVID, and there were two things that occurred. And one of them was courtesy of Mr. Scott, who did I think a decent favor to the Beers. He went to the Board of Trustees, and he secured an extension of the time of the deadline. The normal 6-month deadline was extended, but then, and that was extended twice. It was first extended in June of 2020 to the end of July, and then it was extended a second time by the Board of Trustees by an extra 120 days. However, and this is the important thing, the governor entered a series of orders in the meantime. These were executive orders, and I've outlined them in an email today to Mr. Scott. I copied Mr. Troy, and those executive orders served to add an additional 238 days to all these deadlines. And so time-wise is not a factor here, and we can get stuck in the weeds on that one, but I would encourage everybody to let's handle this. Let's address this on the merits as opposed to as a matter of process. I agree with Mr. Scott that if we need a public hearing in order to vote, fine, let's adjourn this to a time when we can get the public hearing. Let's get the vote. But these gentlemen have acted in good faith, especially given the conditions that have been prevailing over the past year and the past time. They did, in good faith, submit their final. You folks took note of that in early March. Mr. Scott advised the board that they were coming to at its March 8th meeting, that they would be coming back on the 21st. I think it was the March 8th, maybe it was the 11th, that they'd be coming back at the end of the month on the 31st. They came back, the plans had been filed, and nobody raised the issue of time as a factor until now. And so I think it would be, the board has the authority, and I think the law has already provided us with an extension of the deadlines, but even without that, the board has the authority to extend the deadlines. And indeed, Bill can tell you, Mr. Troy can tell you about the law as it pertains to the principle of laches and what have you. The actions of the board in reviewing this during the months of April, May, June, in submitting comments, in soliciting comments, in soliciting response by the engineers, all of that in the context of final plat review would suggest that there was an offer, there was dependence, there was acceptance, and therefore there is laches on the part. And so the deadline should not be an issue. I agree with you that we should put this off, have a public hearing, have the final plat review. And I think Mr. Troy and I, hopefully we can resolve this design issue, or the board and the applicants can resolve this design issue. But right now, that seems to be the only stumbling block. And I would ask the board, even if we can't resolve it, I would ask the board to eventually vote on this, and we'll let a court decide.
Hey, Lisa.
Yes.
And Bill and Mike, this is a question for all of you. Timing aside, I do remember from the onset of this project, to back up what Lisa said, we've talked about the roads and it's been a concern. I don't know the exact dates that it came up, but I know we talked everything about pick your phase number of Lansing trails and we got right down to the park and talking to, Lisa and Janet and, trying to understand the roads and things there. And this is a question more for you, Mike Scott, all, and maybe Brent too, all of these things that we laid out that the beers are, agreeing to or saying yes, no, or saying no to, how many of those do they actually have? How many of those are like code issues? Like it's not a, oh, like, you know what I mean? I remember there were some code issues like, oh, this has got to be, I don't know, it's 55 feet and it has to be 60 or something like that. How many of those items are like that? Do you know, Mike?
Well, the one specific you're talking about would be the right of way, how the width of the right of way. I think that has been solved.
Okay.
I believe they had, don't quote me on this, but they had 50 feet and we required 60 feet.
Oh, okay.
I believe that was taken care of.
Mike Baker, though, I think to answer your question, a lot of them were code issues, frankly. I think the sticking point is the layout of the road, which has been discussed prior, certainly, too. And I just remember it was. And I mean, I have stuff circled saying stop sign, question mark, and all these things from early on. And, preliminary plat is kind of, the first step in our process where we say, yeah, this is more than just a drawing on the napkin. And I think, it can work. And, as long as you do meet these code issues. But I do know that from some of the very early times, the road kept changing. But when it got to, I think what the Mr. Schlatter is referring to is this final road. There just are concerns. Now, these concerns are from our DPW and Mr. Cross. These are the people that we rely on. These are the people that also, in good faith, have met with the Beers to discuss all of this. And so I think it's something we're going to have to address because it's clearly a sticking point. I believe that there were even sort of some informal suggestions on how it could work in a different way. So I don't know. In prior, I thought, I don't absolutely know this, prior I thought to the final plat being submitted. So I don't know where this is broken down, but I will say that, our staff is very accessible. The planning board is very accessible. If there's any questions about anything, I don't believe anybody has ever turned people away. And, the silence was deafening. What we did get was them coming in January of 2021 to put up a Quonset hut garage, which is still, I don't know, half done maybe. There seemed to be a sense of urgency at the time, but I'm hoping it'll be done before winter. I don't know. So yeah, we can continue the discussion, but I think the major problem is the roads, and we rely very heavily on our advisors, Mr. Cross and Mr. Courtney and Mr. Scott, to advise us on some of these issues that are really not in our purview. We do not have the expertise without their assistance. So
May I speak? Lisa and Mike, you have recollections of things happening, and I think you need to go back and review the notes, and then we can go
Okay.
forward. I'm thinking probably 4 weeks, if Ray, that's okay with you, because they meet every other week. So
Right.
they can go through their notes and refresh their recollections. Mike Scott has his hand up.
I was just gonna say, I agree with Mr. Schlatter. Let's go ahead and let's set the public hearing. Let's set the escrow amount and let's go ahead and go through with this.
would you refresh our memory and theirs as to the escrow count required?
The escrow account is for the review fees. It covers all of the council fees and engineering fees that the village incurs during the review of the final plat.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah, Mike.
what's,
Yes, Brent?
Mike, hang on one second, Lisa.
Oh,
What,
which one?
where's the section, what section covers in the code preliminary and final plat review? Do you know off the top of your head?
Page 125-010, it's 125.
You want to talk about,
-7.
Mike, you want to talk about the establishment of the escrow or talk about just basically?
I was just curious about preliminary and final plan review. That's it. That's enough for me. I can go find it quick.
Yeah,
Yes, 125-7. Brent?
So I think there might be two different types of escrow. I think what Mike's referring to is the review fee. At some point in time, once the subdivision is approved and submitted to the trustees, I think that the developer has to provide a construction cost estimate broken down for, the whole process of clearing the land, installing the public utilities, building the roads and et cetera. And then that ends up being either reviewed or approved by the trustees after the planning board reviews the subdivision process.
Right, and yes.
The dedication process. And the purpose of that is in the event of some financial crisis that would affect the developer, that if it were to be half completed, that there would be funds secured for somebody to go ahead and finish the infrastructure.
Okay. All right, so Mike Scott, you're suggesting we go what, to November 30? That's not, or was it Bill that suggested that? Go a month out?
I suggested it, so this is Bill.
Yes,
So that you have to go back and refresh your recollections, and in 2 weeks, you don't say, oh, I need more time.
yeah,
So
I was
just
gonna
move
say that
forward.
is pretty tight.
if you go to 30th, then on the 15th of November, I believe we should be discussing with Brent, possibly John, myself, and Bill about the amount required for the review fee, for the escrow for the review fee. I think that should be attempted on the 15th then.
Question, if I may?
Yes,
If we adjourn it to the 30th, will that give you enough time to put this up for public hearing?
oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, so the 30th will be a public hearing. Do you want us to be involved in the November 15th discussion about review fees?
That's completely up to you if you want to. I mean, we're basically going to be figuring what we feel it's going to cost the village. I mean, obviously it's an estimate of what it's going to cost the village. That's really up to you if you want to be there.
It's not a planning board meeting per se.
Right, yeah, that's what I was wondering. As far as I'm concerned, that can all be done by email. If you could just send us an estimate, we can, or what your calculation is, we can react to it. Would that be fair?
You good with that, Bill?
You're muted, Bill.
That probably would work.
Okay,
I think it is important to note, just so everyone remembers, that if we have the public hearing on the 30th, that we're not going to vote it on the 30th because we keep them open for at least 2 meetings.
right.
I know that you're new here, Ray. So yeah, we generally keep public hearings open for 2 meetings.
Okay, that's fine.
And Ray, our thinking is we don't ever want somebody coming in saying, gee, if only I had known. So we do the work the first time and then we vote the second meeting.
That's fine. So we'll start on the 30th. We do the public hearing on the 30th and then 2 weeks later, and we vote right then, right?
On the 3rd,
Possibly.
well, provided we have all the answers, we feel comfortable with a vote. I'm not going to make a commitment like that yet.
I'm not, I'm being. a
I
little-
mean, but we could all take ill or something and not have a quorum, whatever. So yes, that's our intention.
We wouldn't wish that on
We'll
anybody,
see.
please. So, no, that's fine. I just wanted to get a rough idea. So November 30th, a possible vote on, what is that, the 14th?
The second one is December the 13th. It's
13th,
the
all right.
second Monday of the month.
And do
It
we
is
get,
unlikely we would have another meeting in December, given the date and the holidays.
by waiting that long, do we get to go first? I'm just kidding.
Well, I guess we'll see.
I warn you, Ray drives hard bargains. Here it
I
is.
was gonna say, I guess it depends on How nice you are. Sure. Provided, yeah,
So if,
yeah, probably.
that's good. Mike, Mr. Scott, Mr. Cross, and Mr. Courtney, if you folks would just, either you can send it through Bill or just send it to me directly. You have my email, and include the beers. I'd appreciate that with respect to your numbers. And then we will plan on going forward as you've scheduled this.
I will,
On
keep
November
you-
the 30th.
I will send you the emails and everything, what we need for the plan or for the public hearing. So I'll keep in touch with you on that.
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi there, this is David Beer. I've been silent for a while because my microphone wasn't hooked up properly, but I don't know if there are any questions to be directed to me or my father, since we kind of missed the first few minutes with an equipment issue.
No, I don't think so. I think we just need to be reviewing some of the documents that we have and going back and checking our notes and our recollections so that we're prepared for the 30th.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much for hearing us tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is other business. Is everybody going to be available November 30th? Oh, I guess I'm rushing, sorry. No.
You're right.
Next. No, we
Well,
have.
not November 30th.
Yeah, I was gonna, no, November 8th is what I meant. Our next meeting. Take them one at a time, I think. So everybody's gonna be here or be available. Good. And also on the 30th, because the 30th is right after Thanksgiving. However, we'll still be doing Zoom meetings, so I assume that it will still be okay for everyone. Is that correct? Okay, good. Trustee report. I've actually forgotten. Is that you, Monica?
It's me.
Oh, it's me.
I
Okay.
feel like I have nothing to say because everybody was here to witness it firsthand. Yes.
Oh, that's right, our November 18th meeting. Yes, but you still should report for those who,
That is true for
Or-
those who
or
weren't there.
we
that
have some
obviously it
people
was-
here that were not there.
It was. We had a joint meeting to discuss the village's stance on cannabis regulations going into effect next year and whether the village wanted to opt out or not. So we obviously didn't make a decision there at the meeting. Neither the trustees didn't make a decision, but we did discuss it in pretty good length.
Yeah, that is pretty much, that's all that was discussed, but, and there seems to be,
And I don't know, Ronnie, if anything, yeah, Ronnie, you're muted, but I don't know if anything happened after you adjourned from executive session.
no, I don't think,
I'm gonna
Uh,
judge.
No, we only had to vote on, the trustees had to vote to give me approval to sign an agreement for a legal agreement for monies to be received within a class action suit that we had joined earlier in the year. And that was all. And that has been signed and it should have been sent off to the attorneys that are in charge of the class action. So we should be receiving the money within a few weeks.
Thanks,
now,
Ronnie.
in regard to the cannabis, is everybody, I know Simon's sent the note about some of these, that people can, the retail sales and they can ship cannabis anyway. So, you know, I don't know where this is gonna go quite, but I think the intention is to have the public hearing, right? Isn't that where we left it?
Yep.
At the next trustee meeting, which is going to be,
November 1st.
yep, November 1st.
Who's trustees for November?
Say again?
Who's the trustee or is the planning board rep?
Oh,
for-
who's on deck for covering the meetings?
I think I've got November. I'm going to have to remember that.
It's Carolyn Greenwald.
Hey, look at that. Tony
on.
it is. That's amazing.
Actually, Carolyn, it's supposed to be Tony, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But wait a minute, Jim, you did July.
I did. But I did July because the month that I normally would have come up would have been not, it wouldn't have worked that well for Monica. So you switched Monica and me, and that's why I had July.
Oh. Well, I think that Tony basically has assumed Carolyn's slot, and that is November. So November 1st, Tony, and November the 15th, I guess. Yep, November 1 and 15.
Got it.
Okay, great.
So that, when do I come up?
You don't come up, well, I don't know, I gotta redo the chart.
Okay.
You come up, it's after Monica, you come up, okay, then Monica gets December, so I guess you're January.
Oh,
I'll
Contain your enthusiasm.
I take
It's
offense.
cold and snowy.
Well, I don't know. Now, in January, the governor's going to revisit how we meet, but I think we have until January 22nd or some kind of odd date.
Or is it 15th? I don't.
January 15th is from what I understand, but things
Oh,
are
is it?
changing.
Why did
So,
I think
who
it's
knows?
22nd? I don't know.
Oh,
Okay.
Where are we at with the AV equipment for the village office?
The AV equipment has been installed. We have taken very brief training sessions, but it has not really been used. We can use it at any point if we so choose. We would need at least one person, probably two, in the room to use the equipment. One person to lead the meeting and one person to kind of monitor the equipment. But it seems to work pretty well. And there is an instruction sheet inside the conference room that explains the basics of how to use the system. It's just a matter of getting practice.
Now, I've been attending some of the New York Planning Federation Zoom meetings, and one of them, they did discuss, it was about innovative zoning, updating the zoning. And it did come up about whether we would be able, hopefully, what should they do to continue Zoom meetings? And they said, write your state rep or, whatever. But, I think one of the real possibilities might still be like hybrid, where we would eventually meet and use our system, then perhaps to have attendees not have to travel from wherever they are. But what I would actually like to know about too is what's going on with if we're making any progress with closing out the whole mall situation. Have we heard anything?
Right, at this point, Peter Grossman is finalizing the easements.
Okay,
And as soon as they have the easements, I believe they can submit it to their lender so that they can release the reimbursement check to the village. And so that we can hand over the final plat, signed final plat.
okay.
By the way, if I may, I think
Yeah.
I think John basically saved the mall from flooding today.
Really?
It was heroic.
Well,
And he did it with some wood. It's just like a biblical story. It's fantastic.
I've never seen, to be honest, I've never seen anybody knee deep in water and still have a smile on his face.
when John,
He was like a little kid enjoying every minute of it.
I did.
It's like
actually-
splashing in a big puddle, right?
Yeah, I noticed some problem areas that I guess I should tell somebody about today. I'll talk to Mike about it, but at any rate, yeah. Well, I don't even know if it's stopped yet, but this is pretty amazing.
Yeah, they went around to, John and Chris went around to a lot of places. And I stopped to a couple places to take some pictures and everything. And there was, there's some issues that we need to address over by Monroe Muffler.
Oh, that's been an issue forever.
Yeah, that needs, now we got physical pictures now that we can say, hey, look, this is what's happening. I took some pictures that I'll send to Brent Cross about the, just so we could see how the Lansing Meadows stormwater system works. I'll send those over to Brent for him to review, make sure they're working properly. But it was some of the places where the water was pretty amazing. And John and Chris, they were the guys that they were right on it.
I was gonna say, I saw it coming up out of the piping that runs upside the electrical pole there, the conduit. I saw water gushing up out of them. At
I
least
saw
it
that one
wasn't,
too.
at least it wasn't snow. Look on the
Well,
bright.
Yeah, but this is the third 100-year storm in this year, you know?
Yep.
I feel like I've aged about 300 years this year.
well, okay, if there's nothing else, does anybody have anything else?
Everybody have a good night.
Well, good night. Thanks for coming, John.
I
See ya.
move we adjourn.
Mike Baker has moved that we adjourn. Do I have
Oh,
a
wait.
second? Oh, wait a minute.
Mike Scott has a question.
Scott, wait.
Just real quick, we'll get you out of there. Just to update, the lighting commission is reviewing some samples that you wanted, some examples of lighting so that there's no.
Okay.
confusion.
Thank you, Mike.
Appendix. So they are reviewing it and it's in good hands with them. So you'll be seeing them soon.
Good.
Hands with you. You're doing the example.
Don't admit it publicly. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Monica? Monica beat this time. All those in favor? Aye. At 8:39 p.m.